When I picked up the phone to ask my son Michael what time his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law Diana looked me right in the eye and said with an ice-cold smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. I, for 3 years, have paid their $500 rent every single month. I bought every piece of furniture in their house. I filled their refrigerator when they didn't even have money to eat. I was not a special person. I just stood there in the living room of my own home, holding that phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Diana settled into the sofa I bought them. The pink dress I had chosen for his wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the dream of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, thinking how beautiful I would look in Michael's wedding photos. Photos I would never be in. For weeks, I had been planning every detail. I had set aside extra money to give them $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had called my sister in Mexico to tell her the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom because I thought maybe they would come to celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of that crumbled in 1 second with those 4 poisoned words. Only special people. Michael finally looked up and told me in a voice that sounded rehearsed, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media. I saw Diana's parents posing proudly next to the newlyweds. I saw her brothers toasting with champagne. I saw Diana's white dress, which I helped pay for with the $300 I gave her for personal expenses last month. I saw everything I was not invited to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Diana called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me from the wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost begging. "Grace, the rent is late. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he's going to evict us. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled slightly, as if her world was collapsing. I stayed silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had run to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I had eaten beans and rice so I could give them money for their cravings. And now, after excluding me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the nerve to call me as if nothing had happened. "Diana," I said with a calm that surprised even me, "I didn't realize I needed to tell you. I only help special people." The silence on the other end of the line was so deep I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trembling. She was. "Grace, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mother to me." Lies. All lies wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress for the honeymoon, for the rings that I helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they exchanged them. For so many years, I have lived with this constant feeling of walking on eggshells, measuring every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to receive a crumb of affection from my own son. I have been the perfect mother, the accommodating mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," woke something up in me that had been dormant for too long. I mentally calculated how much money I have spent on them these past 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $20,000. $20,000 that I took from my pension, from my savings, from the money my late husband left, so I could live peacefully in my final years. And all for what? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night, after hanging up the phone, I sat on my bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of accumulated frustration, of years of humiliation swallowed in silence. I cried for all the times they made me feel like my love was a burden, that my presence was a nuisance, that my money was the only valuable thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her disposable. When I woke up the next morning, Something had changed inside me. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal, it was something deeper, colder. I got out of bed and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes as always, the same wrinkles telling stories of years spent giving love without receiving it back. But there was something different in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee just like every morning for the last 40 years. But this time, I didn't think about calling Michael to ask how he slept. I didn't check my phone hoping for a message from him apologizing for the humiliation. For the first time in a long time, my first concern of the day was myself. I sat at the table where I had planned so many surprises for them, where I had counted bills for their expenses, where I had cried in silence when they treated me with indifference. Now that table would witness something completely different. I took out my checkbook, my bank statements, and started doing the math. I wanted to see the exact size of my own stupidity in numbers. Monthly rent, $500 for 36 months, $18,000. Food and groceries, approximately $200 a month, $200 more. Birthday gifts. Christmas anniversaries, at least $3,000. Diana's medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never paid back, $500. The air conditioner repair for their apartment, $700. The living room furniture, $1,200, $33,400. That was the exact figure of my wasted generosity. $33,400 that I had taken from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from the savings I had guarded cent by cent over decades of honest work. All that money thrown away to keep two adults comfortable, two adults who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang and I saw Michael's name on the screen. Normally, I would have rushed to answer heart-pounding, hoping he would finally apologize, that he would explain it was all a misunderstanding. But this time I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally it stopped, and I just kept drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time it was Diana. I let it ring too. Then a text message from Michael came through. "Mom, pick up the phone. We need to talk to you urgently." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 in the afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose, without an errand related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the supermarket for something they needed, the pharmacy for Diana's medications. Today I walked just because I wanted to. I passed the park where I used to take Michael when he was a boy. I remembered that sweet child who would hug me tight and tell me I was the best mom in the world. When did he turn into this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I start to believe I had to buy my own son's affection at the bank, where I had made so many automatic transfers? I stopped in front of the door. The manager, Charles Mendoza, saw me through the glass and waved. I had known him for years. He had processed every one of my transfers to Michael and Diana. He had watched my account empty month after month to fill theirs. I walked in and went straight to his office. "Mr. Charles," I said, "I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have scheduled." He looked at me surprised. For 3 years those transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure? Grace, did something happen?" His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Michael had shown me in months. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," I replied. "I want to cancel everything, and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." While Charles processed the cancellations, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Michael, Diana. Michael again. It was like they had developed a radar to detect when their source of income was in danger. I turned the phone off completely. "Grace," Charles said as he handed me the papers. "Forgive me for stepping out of line, but in all these years I've seen you be very generous with your family. I hope they aren't pressuring you to make these changes." His words touched me deeply. This man who barely knew me beyond bank transactions showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. "They aren't pressuring me, Charles. On the contrary, I finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left a huge weight in that office. For the first time in years, my money was completely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a human being. I walked home thinking about all the things I had given up to please Michael and Diana, the trips I didn't take to save money for them, the friends I stopped seeing because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I abandoned because every dollar I spent on myself was a dollar less for their needs. When I got home, I found 3 cars parked in front of my door. Michael's, Diana's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought one day they would take care of me like I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to my house and found a scene I will never forget. Michael was sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands. Diana was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and there was an older man I didn't know looking through papers on my dining room table. My papers. My personal documents. "What is going on here?" I asked, my voice sounding stronger than I expected. The 3 of them looked at me as if I was the intruder in my own home. Diana was the first to speak, her voice holding that desperate urgency I had heard on the phone. "Grace, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Ramirez is from the law firm we consulted about your situation." "My situation?" The question left my mouth with a calm that surprised me. "What situation? I'm perfectly fine." Michael finally lifted his head and looked at me with those eyes that were once an innocent child's and now only reflected financial panic. "Mom, we went to the bank and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Charles told us you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that." Mr. Ramirez, a man in his 50s with a gray suit and a smile I didn't trust, approached me with his hand extended. "Mrs. Grace, I'm Frank Ramirez, an attorney specializing in family law. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and asked me to evaluate the situation." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked directly to my dining room table and gathered all my documents he had been reviewing without my permission. "These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my authorization." "Mom," Michael intervened with that condescending voice he had perfected in recent years, "we're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First you cut us off financially without explanation, then you don't answer our calls. We think maybe you need professional help." And Diana approached and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for when she needed something. "Grace, honey, we know you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. It's normal at your age to have episodes of confusion." The word confusion rang in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they had brought the lawyer. It wasn't to help me. It was to declare me mentally incompetent and take control of my finances. The same woman who told me they only invited special people to her wedding was now treating me like a senile old woman. "I am not confused," I said with a firmness that made them all fall silent. "I am more lucid than I have been in years, and you are all going to get out of my house, right now." Mr. Ramirez stepped in with that professional voice lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. "Grace, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a legal right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is compromised. They have documented several concerning behaviors." "Concerning behaviors?" The laugh that came out of my throat was harsh, almost cruel. "Like what? Deciding my money is mine, choosing not to finance the lives of 2 adults who treat me like trash." Diana jumped as if I had slapped her. "We have never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will be ours someday anyway. We're just speeding up the process." There it was, the naked, raw truth. Everything I had would be theirs someday. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were just collecting their inheritance early. It didn't matter if I had 70 years left or 70 days. To them, I was just a bank account with legs that had become problematic. "Out," I said, pointing to the door. "All 3 of you, out of my house." Michael stood up with that pouty child expression he made when he didn't get his way. "Mom, we can't just leave like this. We have responsibilities. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next." "I can't?" My voice rose for the first time in the conversation. "Who says I can't? For 36 months I have paid rent that isn't even in my name. I have filled a refrigerator in a house where I am not welcome. I have financed a life that clearly has no room for me." Mr. Ramirez took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. "Grace, we've prepared some documents that could ease this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Michael and Diana to manage your finances more efficiently. It would be temporary, just until you feel better." I took the folder and threw it directly into the trash without even opening it. "The only transition happening here is you walking to the exit." Diana started to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. "You can't do this to us, Grace. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We made financial commitments because we knew we could count on you." "Commitments based on my money," I replied. "Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company. Just on my money. And now that I've decided my money has a better use in my own life, I'm suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal supervision." Michael tried to get closer to me, but I took a step back. He was no longer the boy who used to run into my arms when he had nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between him and a comfortable life financed by others. "Mom, we made mistakes," he said in a voice trying to sound sorry. "The wedding was a misunderstanding. Diana was nervous. I was pressured. We can fix this if you just go back to being reasonable." Reasonable. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means pretending it doesn't hurt to be excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Ramirez gathered his papers with the efficiency of someone used to having proposals rejected. "Grace, this doesn't end here. Your family has legal options. If you are truly making irrational decisions due to mental health issues, a judge can determine you need supervision." His words were like a physical blow. I realized this wasn't just a family manipulation visit. It was a real legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. "Mr. Ramirez," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "I suggest you do your research before threatening a 69-year-old woman who has managed her finances impeccably for 40 years, who raised a son alone after being widowed, who maintained a home, who worked until she honorably retired, and who until last week was financially supporting two perfectly capable adults." Diana stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally showed her true face. "This isn't going to stay this way, Grace. We have rights too, and lawyers." "Perfect," I replied. "Hire all the lawyers you want, with your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums." The three of them headed for the door with the wounded dignity of people unaccustomed to being told no. Before leaving, Michael turned to me one last time. "Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it." "Michael," I said with a deep sadness, but also crystal clarity, "I am already alone. The difference is that now I'm alone by my own choice, not by your neglect." When the door closed behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, but it wasn't from sadness or regret. It was from the adrenaline of having taken back control of my own life. I lay awake in bed, planning my next moves like a general preparing for battle. If Michael and Diana wanted a fight, I would give them a war. But it would be a war I fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 a.m, I was dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of attorney Charles Herrera, a man I had met years ago when I handled my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Ramirez, whom Michael and Diana had brought, Charles had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of seniors. "Grace," he said when I explained the situation, "what your children tried yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your home without permission and reviewed your private documents is also a violation. His words reassured me and alarmed me at the same time. Reassured because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what happened was truly abusive. Alarmed because I realized the situation was more serious than I had thought. "We need to document everything," Charles continued. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We are also going to change your will to protect your assets from any future manipulation attempts." We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Charles whistled when he saw the total sum. $35,400 in 3 years. "Grace, with this money, you could have lived, comfortably traveled, enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." When I left Charles's office, I had a complete plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visits. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank where they had no contacts. And fourth, I would start living the life I had been postponing for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Robert, had known me for years because I was always buying things to repair Michael and Diana's apartment. This time was different. "Grace, what brings you here today? Another emergency at your son's place?" he asked, with the familiarity of someone who had been a silent witness to my wasted generosity. "No, Robert. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want the best quality you have." He looked surprised but didn't ask questions. While he selected the locks, his son Felix, who worked installing security systems, arrived. It was Providence in action. "Felix," I said, "I also need to install security cameras. The whole system. Price is not an issue." While they prepared everything for the next day's installation, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Diana calling from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number after yesterday's confrontation. "Grace, it's Diana. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Talk," I said curtly. "Look, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Michael and I have talked, and we want to make it up to you. What do you think if we organize a special dinner to celebrate our marriage with you? We can have it at your house, cook together like we used to." The manipulation in her words was so obvious it almost made me laugh. "Diana, how much rent do you owe exactly?" The silence on the other end confirmed I had hit the nail on the head. Well, it's 2 months, $1,000 total." "But that's not the only reason I'm calling, Grace. We really miss having you in our lives." "Do you miss me, or do you miss my money?" I asked directly. "Both," she answered with an honesty that surprised me. "Grace, I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we also love you. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, "why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get a call that isn't asking for money? When was the last time you called just to see how I was?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. "Diana, I'm going to explain something to you one time. For 3 years you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You have used me, ignored me, humiliated me, and finally you insulted me in the worst way possible. Now that the money is gone, you suddenly discover you love me." "Grace, please." "No," I interrupted her. "There is no please that matters. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now I'm making mine." I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. I didn't want any more interruptions during my day of liberation. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't visited in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Michael or Diana needed something urgent, or because the money I set aside for myself ended up being for one of their emergencies. "Grace!" shouted Cynthia, my favorite stylist. "What a surprise! I thought you had forgotten about us." "I hadn't forgotten you, Cynthia. I had just forgotten that I deserved to be cared for, too." I got the full treatment. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her kids, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Michael and Diana's needs. "You look beautiful, Grace," she said when she finished. "But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen?" "Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no." When I got home that afternoon, there was a car parked in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart sped up for a moment, thinking Michael and Diana might have returned with reinforcements. But as I got closer, I saw it was an older woman sitting on my front steps. "Grace?" she asked as I got out of the car. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Renee Vasquez. I live in the house next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never had the chance to talk. I heard very loud voices at your house yesterday, and I got worried. Is everything okay?" Her genuine concern touched me deeply. Here was a stranger showing more interest in my well-being than my own son. "Please come in, Renee. I'll make you a coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe." As I made coffee, I told her the whole situation. Renee listened without interrupting, nodding from time to time, and when I finished my story, her eyes were full of tears. "Grace," she said, "you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my obligation to finance her adult life. I also believed that if I didn't give them money, they wouldn't love me." "What happened?" "I cut off the money when I realized they only called me when they needed something. At first it was terrible. They threatened me emotionally, blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to apologize for real. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not money." Her words gave me hope and confirmed I had made the right decision. "Do you think Michael and Diana will ever understand?" "Maybe, maybe not," she answered honestly. "But that's not your responsibility anymore, Grace. Your responsibility now is to live your own life." That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to sleep without worrying if Michael and Diana had money for rent, for food for their whims. I went to sleep thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, Felix and Robert arrived at 8 in the morning to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone kept ringing from unknown numbers. Diana was still trying to contact me from different phones, but I had developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't suit me. "Grace," Felix said as he installed the cameras, "this system will give you total peace of mind. You can see who comes to your house from your phone even when you're not here, and if someone enters without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police." The irony didn't escape me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son. But it didn't hurt like it used to. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my new peace. While they worked, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, call my sister Diane in Mexico. We had lost touch because every time we talked, I ended up telling her about Michael and Diana's achievements, about how much money I had spent on them, about how proud I was to be able to help them. Now I realized our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. "Grace?" Diane answered, surprised. "Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months." "I'm fine, Diane. Better than fine, actually. I'm calling to tell you I finally regained my sanity." I told her the whole story from the beginning, the secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off the funding. Diane listened in silence, and when I finished, her response shocked me. "Grace, sister, it's about time. Every time we talked, it broke my heart to hear you bragging about how much money you gave them, as if love was measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how." "What did you want to tell me?" "That Michael never spoke about you with affection when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always, 'My mom helped me with this,' or 'My mom bought me that,' but never 'I miss my mom,' or 'I love my mom.' It was like you were a service, not a person." Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain, like when a doctor cleans an infected wound. It stings, but it's part of the healing. "You know what else struck me?" Diane continued. "Diana always talked about you in the future tense. When Grace is gone, we'll be able to remodel her house. or when we inherit, we're going to invest in the business, as if they were just waiting for you to die to really start living. That revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. While I was killing myself to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. After hanging up with Diane, I sat in my kitchen processing all this information. 45 years of marriage to a man who truly loved me. 35 years of raising a son alone after being widowed, and 3 years financing 2 adults who saw me as a wealthy nuisance. The doorbell rang, and I saw on the new cameras that it was Renee with a cup in her hands. I opened the door, and she offered me fresh coffee. "I thought you might need company after everything you told me yesterday," she said with that genuine smile I had already begun to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and Renee told me more details about her own experience. "My daughter used to tell me the exact same things Diana tells you. You're like a second mother to me. We're special to you. Someday this will all be ours anyway." They're rehearsed lines, Grace. They learned them in the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. "Do you think that manual actually exists?" I asked, half joking. "Not officially, but they all seem to read from the same book. Chapter 1 is Make Her Feel Indispensable. Chapter 2 is Create Constant Financial Emergencies. Chapter 3 is If She Resists, Question Her Mental Health." We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It was funny and tragic at the same time to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. "Renee, did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money? Every single day for the first 3 months," she answered honestly. "But then I started to see the results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years: visit my husband's grave. I always found excuses not to go because Michael or Diana needed something, or because the taxi money was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Robert's grave looked a little neglected because I hadn't been to clean it in months. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and spoke to him as if he were alive. "Robert, my love, I think I got lost for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Michael. I wanted to be the best mother in the world to compensate somehow for him growing up without a father, but I think in the process, I forgot to be myself." The wind blew gently, and for a moment I felt like he was listening. "Our son became someone I don't recognize, or maybe he was always like this, and I just didn't want to see it. His wife is, well, you already know what she's like. The money you left for me to live peacefully. And I spent it supporting them. But not anymore, my love. I've learned." I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with new ones, and stayed there for another hour, just enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't in a hurry to get home to solve some crisis for Michael and Diana. When I returned home, there were 3 cars parked in front of my door again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras showed me it was Michael, Diana, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. They all looked agitated, talking among themselves and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Charles, my lawyer. "Charles, they're at my house again. This time they brought more people. What should I do?" "Don't get out of the car, Grace. I'm on my way immediately, and I'm calling the police. After our conversation yesterday, I filed for a temporary restraining order. They cannot be on your property." 15 minutes later, Charles and 2 police cars arrived. I watched as the officers spoke with Michael and Diana, as my son gesticulated furiously as Diana cried again. But this time, her tears didn't affect me. One of the officers approached my car. "Ma'am, you can get out. Your visitors are leaving now." When I got out of the car, Michael yelled at me from the street. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." "Michael," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "Family doesn't threaten mental competency hearings. Family doesn't enter other people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs." Diana screamed from the other side of the street. "You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this." Charles intervened. "Mrs. Diana, any future communication must be through my office. And I suggest you consult with an attorney before making threats of collection, because my client has complete documentation of all the voluntary payments she has made for 3 years." I watched them drive away defeated, but not finished. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Renee, and most importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. That night, Renee invited me to dinner at her house. I met her daughter who was visiting, and I could see with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke with respect, asked genuinely about each other's lives. They laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money a single time during the whole evening. "This is what I wanted with Michael," I confessed to Renee when her daughter left. "And maybe someday you'll have it," she replied. "But first he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income." For the first time in weeks, I went to sleep feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The security cameras showed me that Michael and Diana drove past my house several times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes parking for a few minutes, but never getting out. It was like they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for their next move. Charles had advised me to document every one of these visits, so I kept a detailed log with dates and times. "Their persistence is going to work in our favor," he had told me. "Every time they show up after being told not to, it strengthens our case for the permanent restraining order." On Friday morning, I was eating breakfast peacefully when the doorbell rang. The cameras showed a young, well-dressed woman with a folder in her hands and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but something in her posture told me it wasn't a social visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Grace," she said when I opened the door. "I'm a caseworker from Adult Protective Services. We received a report that you might be at risk, and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. Michael and Diana had escalated the situation. It wasn't just threats from private lawyers anymore. Now they had involved the government. "Can I see your identification?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She showed me an official-looking ID. "I'm Rachel Mendez, a social worker. May I come in to speak with you?" I let her in because I knew refusing would be worse for my case. Rachel sat in my living room and took a form out of her folder. "Mrs. Grace, we received reports that you've had significant changes in your financial behavior, that you've cut off communication with your family, and that you've shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also informed that you have refused medical help from your loved ones." Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like an unstable old woman. I recognized Diana's hand in the phrasing. She had always been skilled at manipulating words to get what she wanted. "Ms. Rachel," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation, it's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't have a problem talking with me." That phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," made me angry. It was the same logic abusers use to justify their invasions. "If you're innocent, you shouldn't complain about me violating your privacy." "Ma'am, I'm going to call my lawyer. You can wait here or come back another day, but I am not answering questions without legal representation present." I called Charles, and he arrived in 20 minutes. When he walked in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Ms. Mendez," he said, after reviewing her ID. "I hope you have a court order to be here because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized evaluation constitutes harassment." "Sir," Rachel replied with less confidence than before, "we have reports from a concerned family about her well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "Which family?" Charles asked curtly. "The same family that tried to make her sign a power of attorney without representation. The same family that entered her home without permission and reviewed her private documents. The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money." Charles took a folder from his briefcase and put it on the table. "Right here, I have complete documentation of financial and emotional abuse against my client. $32,400 taken from her accounts in 3 years, systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail." If anyone needs to be investigated here, it's not my client. Rachel reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious the information she had been given did not match the reality in front of her. "Mrs. Grace," she finally said, "can you explain to me why you decided to cut off financial support to your son so abruptly?" "Because I discovered they were using me," I answered simply. "Because I realized that to them, I wasn't a mother, I was a bank account. Because I got tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as a nuisance." "But don't you consider it your responsibility to help your family?" The question outraged me. "Ms. Rachel, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son to age 18, educate him, and give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility, it's my choice, and I chose to stop." Charles intervened. "Ms. Mendez, would you consider a 35-year-old adult who cannot pay his own rent without help from his 69-year-old mother to be a normal situation?" Rachel didn't answer immediately. I could see she was rethinking the whole situation. "Mrs. Grace," she asked after a moment, "do you manage your own finances?" "Completely. I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is up to date and in order. I live independently. As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors." "Do you take medication?" "Only vitamins and supplements. I have no medical conditions that require medication." Charles added, "My client just underwent full medical evaluations as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical health." Rachel closed her folder and sighed. "Mrs. Grace, based on this conversation and the documentation I've reviewed, I see no evidence that you are at risk or need intervention. I'm going to close this case." After she left, Charles and I sat in silence for a few minutes. "Grace," he finally said, "this is going to keep escalating. Michael and Diana will not stop until they regain access to your money. We need to prepare for their next move." That afternoon, as I reflected on the social worker's visit, I realized something important. I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like a woman who had taken control of her life and was willing to defend it. I called Diane to tell her what had happened. "Grace, sister," she said after hearing everything, "do you know what impresses me most about this story? It's not how badly Michael and Diana behaved, it's how strong you have become." Her words touched me deeply. She was right. A month ago, a visit from a social worker would have devastated me. It would have made me doubt myself. It would have made me consider funding Michael and Diana again just to avoid problems. But now I was firm in my decisions. That night Renee came to visit me with a bottle of wine. "Grace, I want to celebrate with you." "Celebrate what?" "That today you resisted another attack on your freedom and came out victorious. Every time you stand firm, you get stronger." We toasted to my new strength, to my new life, to the freedom I had been waiting for without even knowing it for years. "Renee," I said as we drank our wine, "do you think I'll ever stop missing the Michael he was as a child?" "Probably not," she answered honestly, "but you will stop letting that nostalgia keep you prisoner of the Michael he is now." Her words held a deep wisdom. I could love the child my son had been without allowing the abusive adult he had become to keep hurting me. That night, I slept deeply, knowing that every day I was becoming stronger, more independent, more free. Michael and Diana could keep trying to manipulate me, blackmail me, or scare me, but they had already lost their power over me. My new life was just beginning. 2 weeks passed without any news from Michael and Diana, and I started to believe they might have accepted reality. But one Tuesday morning, as I was watering the plants in my garden, I saw an unfamiliar car park in front of my house. An older man in a suit and a young woman with folders got out. My heart raced, but no longer with fear, with indignation. How many more times were they going to try the same thing? The man approached my door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Grace Martinez, I am Dr. Richard Vega, a geriatric psychiatrist. This is my assistant Patricia. Your family hired us to conduct an evaluation of your mental state. I don't need a psychiatric evaluation, I said from my garden without approaching them, and you are on private property without authorization. Ma'am, doctor. Vega insisted. Your son is very worried about you. He says you've had drastic personality changes, irrational behavior with money, and episodes of paranoia. A simple evaluation could resolve all these concerns. The assistant Patricia added in a syrupy voice, It's just a conversation, Grace. If you're fine as you say, the evaluation will confirm it, and your family will be at ease. I recognized the tactic immediately. It was the same one Diana had used. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't have a problem. But I was no longer the same naive woman from a month ago. Dr. Vega, I said with authority, I am 69 years old and have managed my affairs independently my entire adult life. I am not going to submit to psychiatric evaluations just because my son doesn't like that I stopped financing his life. Ma'am, we understand your resistance, Patricia said with that condescending voice people use with small children. But the evaluation is for your own good. My own good? The laugh that came out of my throat was bitter. Do you know what was for my own good? Stopping payment on the rent for 2 adults who treated me like trash. Do you know what else was for my own good? Installing cameras to protect myself from family members who enter my house without permission. At that moment, Charles arrived in his car. Seeing him, Dr. Vega and Patricia exchanged uncomfortable glances. Dr. Vega, Charles said after getting out, I hope you have a court order to be here, because otherwise you are violating the restraining order we have against my client's family. We are not family, the doctor replied defensively. We are mental health professionals hired by concerned family members. Hired by family members who are ordered not to approach my client, Charles retorted curtly. What you are doing is called harassment by proxy, and it is equally illegal. Charles took out his phone and called the police. Officer, I need you to remove 2 people from my client's property. They are violating a restraining order. While we waited for the police, Dr. Vega tried to justify his presence. Grace, your son showed us worrying evidence. Unpaid medical bills, stockpiled medications, erratic behavior with money. Doctor, I interrupted. My son lied to you. I have no pending medical bills because I am not sick. I don't have stockpiled medications because I don't take medication. And my behavior with money is perfectly rational. I stopped giving it away to people who mistreated me. But ma'am, Patricia insisted, your family says you threatened to disinherit them completely, that you changed your will without consulting anyone. Of course I changed my will. My voice rose for the first time. Why would I leave my inheritance to people who exclude me from the important moments of their lives? Why would I reward abuse with money? 2 police cars arrived, and Officer Johnson, who already knew the situation from previous visits, approached Dr. Vega. Doctor, I need you to leave this property immediately. This woman has a protection order in place. Officer, we are health professionals. We are not breaking any laws. Yes, you are, Charles intervened. You are here as representatives of people who are prohibited from approaching my client. It is indirect harassment. Dr. Vega and Patricia left grumbling, but before getting in their car, Patricia yelled at me. Grace, your family just wants to help you. Don't let them isolate you from the people who love you. The people who love me don't try to declare me crazy to steal my money, I yelled back. After they left, Charles and I sat in my living room to plan the next step. Grace, this has gotten out of control. Michael and Diana are spending money they don't have hiring professionals to try and declare you incompetent. This means they are desperate. What else can they do? They can try for a competency hearing. It's expensive and hard to win, but if they get a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify for them, they could succeed in having a guardian appointed. The idea terrified me. They could take away control of my money. They could try. But we have solid evidence that you are completely sound of mind and that they are motivated by greed, not genuine concern. That afternoon, I called Diane to vent. Sister, she said after hearing my story, Do you realize how far they are willing to go for money? They are risking family relationships, spending on lawyers and doctors, destroying their own reputation, all to get back access to your bank account." Her words made me reflect. Michael and Diana had revealed their true nature completely. There was no going back. There was no possibility of genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a respected mother or mother-in-law. I had always been just money on legs. That revelation, though painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They themselves had proven that my emotional and physical well-being mattered less to them than my money. In the evening, Renee came to visit me with a surprise. She had invited her friends from the gardening club to meet me. "Grace," she introduced me, "these are my friends. Cynthia, whom you know from the salon, Maria, Linda, and Hope. We have all been through similar situations with abusive relatives." We spent the evening sharing stories. Maria had had to set boundaries with a brother who constantly asked to borrow money. Linda had cut ties with a daughter who only visited when she needed cash. Hope had had to change her will after discovering her grandchildren saw her as their retirement plan. "What hurts the most," I confessed, "isn't losing the money I gave them. It's realizing I never had the love I thought I did." "Grace," Hope said with the wisdom of her 80 years, "true love isn't bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real." Her words were like a balm for my wounded soul. She was right. I had been buying attention, not love. I had been financing an illusion. "You know what I discovered?" I told my new friends. "The loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than the loneliness of being alone. At least now, when I'm alone, I'm in good company." We all laughed and toasted with tea to our newfound wisdom. That night, after my new friends left, I sat in my garden to think. The stars were shining brighter than ever, or maybe I was just seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone financially. I had no dependents. I had no economic responsibilities to anyone but myself. And instead of scaring me, that reality excited me. I could travel if I wanted. I could remodel my house. I could buy nice clothes. I could donate to charities I cared about. I could invest in my own future instead of financing the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope, and for the first time in years, I was eager to plan my future. A month after the psychiatrist's visit, I thought I had finally won the war. I had settled into a beautiful routine. I ate breakfast peacefully, reading the newspaper, tended my garden, had lunch with Renee, or one of my new friends, and in the afternoons, I dedicated myself to activities I had abandoned for years. I had taken up painting again, something I was passionate about before becoming Michael and Diana's personal financier. But one Thursday morning, as I was painting flowers on my new easel, Charles arrived at my house with a grim expression that froze my blood. "Grace, we need to talk. Michael and Diana have filed a formal competency lawsuit in family court. They are petitioning to have a legal guardian appointed." The words fell on me like stones. I knew it was a possibility, but hearing it said aloud made it terribly real. Does that mean they can take away control of my money? If a judge determines you do not have the capacity to manage your affairs, yes. They could appoint Michael as your legal guardian, which would give him total control over your finances. I sat down heavily on my sofa, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had ever experienced. My own son was trying to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. Charles, what evidence can they have? You yourself have seen that I am perfectly sane. They have statements from 3 witnesses who claim to have seen you behaving erratically. They also submitted medical bills that they claim you haven't paid, and medications you are supposedly hoarding without taking. But that's a lie. I have no pending medical bills or hoarded medications. I know, Grace, but they have fabricated convincing evidence. They also have Dr. Vega's statement saying you refused to cooperate with the psychiatric evaluation, which they are interpreting as evidence of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They had turned my refusal to submit to an unnecessary exam into evidence of mental illness. They had used my instinct to protect myself against them as proof that I needed protection. Who are the 3 witnesses? Charles consulted his papers. Diana, of course, a neighbor named George Herrera, and someone who claims to be your pharmacist, Edward Ruiz. George Herrera was the neighbor across the street, an unpleasant man who had always had problems with me because my friends sometimes parked in front of his house. Edward Ruiz was indeed my pharmacist, but I didn't understand what he could have said against me. "I need to talk to Edward," I told Charles. "Something isn't right there." We went to the pharmacy together that same afternoon. Edward greeted me with surprise and nervousness. "Grace, good to see you. How are you?" "Edward, I was told you signed a statement saying I have erratic behavior with my medications." His face turned red as a tomato. "Grace, Your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago asking about your medications. She told me she was worried because you were acting strange." "And what did you tell her?" "I explained that you barely buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have regular prescriptions, but she insisted that this was proof you weren't taking care of your health properly." Charles intervened. "Edward, did you sign any paper?" She brought a document that said, "I confirmed Mrs. Grace had irregular medication purchasing patterns. I thought it was for health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit." My own pharmacist had been tricked into signing something he didn't fully understand. Diana's manipulation knew no bounds. "Edward," I said, "I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I do not have problems with medication." "Of course, Grace, I feel terrible about this misunderstanding." After the pharmacy, we went to confront George Herrera. When we knocked on his door, he greeted us with obvious hostility. "What do you want, Mr. Herrera?" Charles said, "I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. So what if I did? That woman is crazy. She's been acting weird for weeks." "Can you be more specific about what behaviors you've observed? Installing cameras like she lives in a war zone, having strange people visit her at all hours, yelling in the street with her family." I realized George had interpreted everything out of context. The cameras were for protection. The strange people were my new friends. The yelling was me defending my home from Michael and Diana's invasions. "Mr. Herrera," I said, "do you know why I installed the cameras?" "No, and I don't care." "To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law who were entering my house without permission and threatening me." "That's just what a crazy person would say," he replied cruelly. There was no way to reason with him. His testimony was based on superficial observations interpreted with malice. That night, Charles and I sat down to plan our defense. "Grace, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Helen Morales, who is an expert in mental capacity evaluations. She can officially confirm that you are completely sane." "And what if Michael and Diana bribed the judge? What if none of this matters because they've already decided to declare me incompetent?" "Grace, the legal system isn't perfect, but it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motivations. We are going to fight this." The next day, I went to my appointment with Dr. Morales. She was a woman in her 50s with kind but perceptive eyes. "Mrs. Grace, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and tests to evaluate your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly." For 2 hours, she asked me questions about my memory, my reasoning ability, my financial comprehension, my emotional health. She also gave me cognitive tests and asked me to solve math and logic problems. "Mrs. Grace," she said at the end, "your results are well above average for your age. Not only are you mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent." "Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this?" "Based on what you've told me and the documents I've reviewed, this appears to be a classic case of elder financial abuse. Unfortunately, it's more common than people think." I left the appointment feeling validated, but also sad. The professional confirmation of my sanity was a relief, but it also confirmed that the legal battle was real and necessary. That afternoon, Renee organized an emergency meeting with all our friends from the gardening group. When I told them about the competency lawsuit, they were all outraged. "Grace," Maria said, "we are going to testify in your favor. We have been with you for weeks and anyone can see you are perfectly fine." "Better than fine," added Linda. You're more lucid and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know." Hope with her 80-year-old wisdom took my hands. "Grace, my child, what your children are doing is not new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents crazy to get their money. But you have something many of those victims didn't: documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you." Her words gave me hope. I was not alone in this battle. I had an army of strong women who had seen my transformation firsthand. "Do you know what's saddest about all this?" I told them. "Michael and Diana are willing to destroy any possibility of future reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything before there's no coming back from this." "And maybe that's for the best," Cynthia replied. "At least now you know exactly who they are, and you can act accordingly." That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I truly cried. Not from sadness, but from grief. I was saying a final goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love was reciprocated. But something new was also being born in me, a steely determination not to let them rob me of not only my money, but my dignity and my freedom. The war had officially begun, but I was ready to fight. The court date arrived 3 weeks later. I woke up early, dressed in my best black suit, and looked at myself in the mirror with a determination I had never felt before. Today it wasn't just my mental capacity being judged. It was my dignity as a human being, my right to live free from abuse, my value beyond my bank account. Charles arrived at 7 in the morning to review our strategy one last time. "Grace, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove you are incompetent. We just have to show that you are not." "And what if the judge is already biased against me?" "Judge Harrison has a reputation for being fair. I've researched his previous cases, and he doesn't automatically favor families. He cares about protecting the rights of seniors." We arrived at the courthouse at 9. In the hallway, I saw Michael in a new suit he probably bought for the occasion, and Diana dressed in black as if she were at a funeral. Maybe she was. The funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Michael avoided my gaze. But Diana held my stare with a coldness that confirmed to me that this was for her just business. Their lawyer was an older, elegant man with the kind of confidence that comes from winning similar cases before. When he began his opening statement, his strategy was clear: to paint me as a confused old woman who had been manipulated by strangers into pushing her loving family away. "Your Honor," he said in a solemn voice, "Mrs. Grace Martinez has shown evident mental decline in recent months. She has cut off all financial support to her family without rational explanation, installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia, and isolated herself from her loved ones under the influence of neighbors and lawyers who are clearly taking advantage of her vulnerable condition." Every word was carefully chosen to make my empowerment sound like dementia, my freedom sound like external manipulation. Then they called their witnesses. Diana was the first to testify, and her performance was worthy of an Oscar. She cried as she described how I had completely changed, how I had become hostile and paranoid, how I had isolated myself from the family that loved me. "Your Honor," she said with a broken voice, "Grace was always like a second mother to me. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want to help her get the care she needs." Lies wrapped in convincing tears. When Charles cross-examined her, the cracks in her story began to show. "Mrs. Diana, can you tell the court the last time you called my client for a reason other than asking for money?" Diana stammered. "Well, we always talked about many things." "Can you give a specific date?" "I don't remember exact dates, but is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony." "Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her you had only invited special people?" Diana turned red. Those words were taken out of context. What would be the correct context for telling your mother-in-law she isn't a special person? She couldn't answer convincingly. Michael was next. Seeing him on the stand swearing to tell the truth as he prepared to lie about my mental health was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I had raised alone, the one I had dedicated my entire life to. My mother was always very generous with us, he testified. But lately, she has become erratic and irrational. We believe she is being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her. When Charles cross-examined him, the mask fell completely. Mr. Michael, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? I don't know the exact amount. Would $33,000 sound approximately correct? Maybe. She was always generous. And how many times did you visit your mother without asking her for money? The silence was deafening. Is it true that you and your wife entered my client's house without permission and reviewed her private documents? We were worried about her. Is it true you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help her manage her finances. At 35 years old, do you need help from your 69-year-old mother to pay your rent? Michael couldn't answer with dignity. George Herrera testified about my supposed erratic behaviors, but when Charles asked him for details, he admitted he had never spoken to me directly and that all his information was based on superficial observations. Dr. Vega testified that my refusal to be evaluated was evidence of mental decline, but Charles presented the documentation from our evaluation with Dr. Morales, which completely contradicted his conclusions. Then it was our turn. Charles first called Edward my pharmacist, who explained how he had been tricked into signing a statement that misrepresented my medication habits. Dr. Morales testified about my excellent mental state, presenting the results of the cognitive tests, which were flawless. Charles from the bank testified about my financial competence, explaining that my decisions to cancel automatic transfers were completely rational and processed correctly. Renee and my friends from the gardening club testified about my lucidity, my new vitality, and my ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood with dignity and walked to the stand feeling the weight of 69 years of experience of wisdom earned through pain of strength discovered in adversity. Charles guided me through my testimony, allowing me to tell my full story. The $33,000 spent in 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the invasion of my privacy, the legal threats. Mrs. Grace, Charles asked me finally, why did you decide to cut off financial support to your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I was receiving from them was not love. I answered, my voice clear and strong. It was a business transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I as a person was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret that it took me so long to make it. Michael's lawyer tried to make me seem confused during his cross-examination, but I answered every one of his questions with clarity and precision. When he tried to suggest my new friends had manipulated me, I explained that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect, not financial interest. In his closing argument, Michael's lawyer kept insisting I was a victim of external manipulation. Charles was devastating in his response. Your Honor, what we have seen here is not the case of an incompetent elderly woman, but that of a woman who finally found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have not presented any real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is frustration. Frustration that their source of income decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own resources. Judge Harrison retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he returned, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, "It is evident to this court that Mrs. Grace Martinez is in full possession of her mental faculties. The professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, while they may be painful for her family, are completely rational and within her rights." My heart began to beat faster. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than genuine concern for Mrs. Martinez's well-being. The court completely denies the petition for guardianship. I had won. I had won not only the legal battle, but my freedom, my dignity, my right to live without being abused by those who were supposed to love me. When we left the courthouse, I saw Michael and Diana talking furiously with their lawyer. Diana shot me a look of pure hatred before walking away. Michael looked at me one last time, and for a second I saw something that might have been regret. But it was already too late. That night, Renee organized a celebration at my house with all our friends. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. Grace. Hope told me, "Today you didn't just win a lawsuit, you won your life back." She was right. For the first time in years, the future belonged completely to me. I could travel, I could love, I could create, I could live without fear, without guilt, without manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved into a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half of my money to organizations that protect seniors from family abuse. With the other half, I began to live the life I had always wanted. I traveled to Europe, took art classes, joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Michael and Diana again. I heard through the grapevine that they had to move into a smaller apartment and that Diana had gotten a job for the first time in years. Maybe adversity would teach them what my generosity never could, the value of honest work and independence. Some nights when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead. And in her place, someone was born who understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Grace. I'm 70 years old, and I finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself.